Hey guys, how's it going? As mentioned, I figured I better finish off the Frankenstein reviews by talking about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from 1994. So yeah, this is one of my favorite adaptations of the Frankenstein novel because it's a little more fateful, if you will, to the, source material. Starring Kenneth Branagh in the role, directed by Kenneth Branagh, of course, starring also Robert De Niro as the monster and Helena Bonham Carter as Elizabeth. So yeah, a pretty big budgeted Hollywood A-list cast that's, fatefully done. So very rare to see. So let's not waste any time and get right into the video, shall we? So today on Movie Macabre Monday. Hello and welcome back. So yes, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Why do I love it so much and why do I think it's fateful? Well, right from the very opening, you get the voyage to the North Pole from Captain Walton's journey that plays out just like in the book to, go forth with the Arctic voyage. And just like in the original book, you see Walton crash into the glaciers and get sidetracked with trying to go forward instead of picking a different route. So then he gets stuck in the glaciers up in the north. And out in the distance, they see something coming, but it collapses and they realize it's a human being. And it's, of course, Victor. They, of course, hear out in the distance as well as Victor collapses something out there that is believed to be a creature of some sort. The huskies that they have aboard the ship go chasing after the sound. They get horribly mangled and destroyed, which is, by the way, just gory because of the R rating. Yes, this is rated R, so you get a lot of gory and graphic scenes in this movie. You see all these huskies get mangled due to the monster, retaliating and fighting back. Of course, the crew members collect Victor on the captain's ship, and they, want to know more about him. And Victor, of course, telling Walton about the dangers of trying to be too obsessed with, work and all that sort of thing. Warning him about, being too fixated. So anyways, much like in the book, after that confrontation, you get Victor's flashback, his past. You see him as a child in his flashback, and of course, Elizabeth. And you also see, his obsession with life build up, of course. In this one, Kenneth Branagh plays Victor more tragic. He experiences his mother dying before him in his early adult years because of his birth of his little brother killing his mother. So that starts his journey with his life after death and trying to preserve life. So then you see Victor pursue this obsession by making contraptions. He makes a little dog thing toy for his little brother. He also makes this contraption to conduct electricity, and that's due to because of seeing, much like in the 1818 version of the novel, seeing lightning strike the tree. So he's obsessed with the elements, trying to harness something to give something, power and source and all that sort of thing. So he conducts this experiment, sort of lightning experiment, this metal rod thing, and they have static electricity and they shock each other, all that sort of thing. A flashback, he, of course, his mother gifts him the journal, his famous journal, much like in the book, when he goes to university. So he goes to university with this journal to Ingolstadt from Geneva, and he, of course, promises Elizabeth, once he's finished with his education, that he wants to marry her. So that plays out just like in the original book. Of course, much like in the original book, Victor goes to Ingolstadt to study, but he doesn't get along with his professors. There's always a debate between, much like in the scenes in the book and in the movie, scenes of Victor having debates with his professors about how there is a way he believes, of trying to resurrect life after death, and his professors think he's a nut job. He also meets Henry, his friend in this, which I like Henry in this adaptation of the book because he's a little more little more layered and a little more human, so to speak. He has a little more comedic sort of aspects to this character, which is, I can't remember the actor's name, but the actor that portrays Henry in this is, I thought was a little more likable of a performance versus other adaptations that I've seen. Of course, he meets Henry, and Henry befriends him, and of course he also befriends this professor. He also befriends this professor, Dr. Walden, who of course has the same interests as, sees that Victor is having these debates and having, you know, with his professors about, you know, resurrection and trying to preserve life and all that sort of thing. And he sees this as a way to teach Victor his own, you know, curiosities and obsessions. So in this one, Walden is a little more like Victor and more sympathetic towards Victor's, you know, interest. So you see Walden take Victor under his wing to show him his experiments he's work on. He has this weird monkey hand that he uses that's hooked up to, you know, electricity prongs that to reanimates its former, you know, reflexology and all that. He claims he's studying Chinese acupuncture as a way to, you know, further these studies a bit. So, you know, this plays into the whole, you know, interest of Victor more. Of course, Victor gets more enthused and more obsessed because he is now having a outlet for someone to, you know, fuel his obsession more. Of course, during this time, unlike the book though, during this time they incorporate the smallpox outbreak during the whole Victorian era into this adaptation. Walden gets killed by a crazed patient that has smallpox, and played by Robert De Niro. So this sets up Robert De Niro's character for much later when he becomes a monster. So Robert De Niro gets hung for killing Walden. Victor becomes even more obsessed, so he starts collecting body parts from the morgue. He collects Dr. Walden's brain, which is much like in the 1931 version of the movie where they collect the brain for the creature. So he collects the brain, he collects, you know, limbs, he collects legs, everything. And the thing that I find interesting in this adaptation there during, you know, Victor's collecting is that in this adaptation he collects eels and collects amniotic fluid to, as a way, as a source to, you know, resurrect the body instead of using, you know, electricity and elements like in the Universal monster films, which I always find was interesting. Grounded feel, less than a realistic aspect, but more of a grounded feel to it. I still love the Universal monster movie, but this one I sort of like a little bit more because of the whole different way of trying to do the experiment on the monster, which I thought it was always cool in this one. Plus the steampunky aspects in this one too. You know, when Victor is creating the monster in his lab, it's just this crazy, crazy lab, much like in the 1931 version of the movie, where they just have all this weird copper and steam kind of punky contraption. There's this big copper casket that's Victor places on the body, but the only way for him to place the body in this weird casket, he uses a gurney or some kind of hoist to hoist the body going forward into this whole casket filled with amniotic fluid. And so the eels can get down from this tube thing. They have this weird bag that kind of looks like an anus. So it's sort of just over the top craziness that I love. And I see a lot of people make a complaint about this adaptation of the movie that they go a little bit too over the top, but I kind of like it. I kind of like how crazy and grounded this movie, at least in areas they ground it, but they also go fantastical and crazy, like the Universal monster movie. So it's a nice blend of the elements between the two. Also, you get the scene where Victor starts saying, you know, paying homage to the classic Universal monster film. It's alive. it's alive, you know. But in this one, instead of Victor saying it's alive, he says live, live. So it's a very much play juxtaposition between the two scenes to give homage to the old 19 classic 31 film. So that happens. So Victor thinks that his experiment is a failure and denounces it. He hears a big bang in the casket, so he runs towards the casket and sees it try to live. And of course, you get the jump scare with Robert De Niro popping out of the casket and tipping over, and this gross, ambiolic fluid is all over the place. They're slipping all over. Victor's trying to get the monster back on his feet, but it doesn't work. The monster slips and falls into this bunch of change and hoists the monster up by accident and gets killed. And Victor has given up because he just thinks that the experiment's dead and gone with. He writes this in his journal and places it in the trench coat, seemingly thinking that nobody will find it, and the monster's dead, and he thinks that he can get on with his life and he's done with having to do any more experiments. Of course, late in the night, Victor doesn't realize this, but the monster is very much back to life and living. The monster, very much like in the Boris Karloff version, is very childlike, even in Robert De Niro's performance. He tries to, like sort of a childlike innocence, tries to go up to Victor as if it's his parent and tries to, seek comfort and, all that sort of thing. Victor gets scared because of what the monster looks like in this adaptation. And I gotta say, the makeup on this movie, for at least a Robert De Niro look on the monster, is just done brilliantly. I love how grotesque it looks. I like how, how it's all stitched together. They have very cool makeup effects of all the stitching. And I really like the little touch there too with the eyes, how his eyes are two different colors to make it really seem like he's really built up from a bunch of body parts to really give that, feel and everything to the character, which I think is just brilliant. I really love it. Victor, of course, tries to kill the monster with an axe. The monster runs away after being neglected from Victor. He seeks refuge in the village, and of course the villagers see that he is the same, made up as the same patient. They assume it's the same guy that caused the plague that seemingly lived after the hanging. And of course the monster freaks out and runs away and has, emotional distress and runs away. And of course seeks refuge where the old, just much like where the novel takes place, the monster seeks refuge at the old man's, farmhouse. At this farmhouse where the old man and the family lives. And with the daughter, you get the scene where, the monster is spying and eavesdropping on this family, trying to pick up intelligence, words, all that sort of thing, pick up on English. He, of course, picks up on English. He finds out that Victor Frankenstein's journal's in the trench coat that he borrowed and starts to read through that and realizes, how to speak English, how to, use words, etc. So after that, the old man's son and his wife are experiencing problems. They can't make rent and they can't make food for their crops. So the monster helps him out with during a winter drought. He helps him out by harvesting their potatoes, so he helps him out that way. The little girl calls him the good spirit of the forest and gives him a flower for, generosity, so to speak, because they don't know what he looks like. The little girl just assumes it's, some spirit helping them out, an angel, so to speak. And also with the rent troubles, the landlord tries to collect his money and attacks the old man, and a very scheming, brood landlord that is using his power to intimidate the family. The monster sees this and attacks the landlord. The landlord whelps and the family. Of course, the old man thanks the monster, but the family wonders what's going on. And there's a great scene where Robert De Niro and the old man have a great bit of dialogue and how the monster feels as though he's ugly and won't be liked, and the old man doesn't see that because he's blind. So there's a nice bit of dialogue between the two of them. The son sees who he's talking to and freaks out and attacks him, and the old because of that whole exchange, the monster runs away. Unfortunately, the monster didn't think of it at the time, but he, of course, has the flower that the little girl gives him. And, of course, because of being outcasted and, being rushed out, so to speak, during the whole spur of the moment, if you will, he doesn't realize he could have saved himself and, the family could have forgiven him by showing the flower that the little girl gave him. He realizes this and starts running towards the house. They're not there because they run off because of what they experienced. And of course, he feels angry about it and burns down the house and says, "I shall seek my revenge, Frankenstein!" Just a really good delivery from Robert De Niro, and I just love it. And of course, he realizes through the journal, where to go. He goes to Geneva and tries to seek his revenge. So Victor, of course, is in Geneva, back at Geneva, because he's, of course, wedding Elizabeth. And Elizabeth and him are getting ready for a wedding. At that time, William is attending too, and William goes off in the woods and gets scared of the monster because the monster is sort of residing in the woods to seek his revenge. And unfortunately, during that whole transpired thing, he kills William. You don't see it on screen, thankfully. It's sort of off screen. Because William hasn't returned, Victor and his family get nervous and start having a search party for William. And during this search party, Josephine is exhausted and seeks refuge in a barn to rest out for the night, and instead the monster uses that opportunity to frame Josephine as the murderer of William by putting William's necklace on Josephine's sleeping body. So then next morning the police show up and find out that Josephine killed William, even though that didn't happen. So Josephine gets hung. Elizabeth and Victor plead, but it doesn't work. They just fail miserably and tragically. Victor goes back and, of course, is greeted by the monster. The monster tells him to meet him out in the mountains for a talk. So Victor travels out after Elizabeth is wondering what's going on, etc., and he meets the monster finally face to face. And the dialogue between Victor in this and the monster, I think, is just very well done. And the way the performances between Kenneth Branagh and Robert De Niro are just so well done. Robert De Niro, his dialogue, especially as a monster, going into, saying, am I just raw materials, or that I have a soul or something, because he can play the recorder, as he says, or is it because he's made up with somebody that can play the recorder, or that sort of thing. He also asked Victor to create a bride for him, a mate, so that way he can feel like he belongs to someone like him, he says. And Victor declines, but he threatens Victor by attending and basically wreaking havoc. So that's what happens. Victor refuses at first, but the monster insists, and of course digs up Josephine's dead body in this adaptation instead of some random corpse. In this one, he digs up Josephine's body and demands Victor to create the bride for him from Josephine, and he refuses and once again threatens him, all that. So in desperation, Victor tries to do the experiment. Elizabeth almost leaves him, and there's a great emotional moment between Victor and Elizabeth, talking about how he loves her and all that sort of thing, and she, they reconsider and move on with their lives and start to wed. Because Victor got sidetracked and didn't make the monster for a specific day of the day, Victor failed on his promise. So the monster decides to seek his revenge yet again and kills Elizabeth because he failed to create a bride for him. Kills Elizabeth, yanks her heart out in a very gruesome fashion, and during the whole, conflict of things, he tosses the body to the side, and Elizabeth's dead corpse hits a lamp and her hair gets charred and burnt, and Victor runs to put it out, and he is crying and just so emotional because he has lost another loved one in his life or someone that he cares about. And it's just a brilliant performance by Kenneth Branagh. So after that, Victor decides to create the monster, bride for the monster that he created. And unfortunately, he just doesn't decide. He's a sort of still obsessed and tragic over losing another loved one, so he decides that he wants to create the bride using Elizabeth's corpse. He chops off the head and uses her head for, because of her heart not being in the body, she uses Josephine's heart body since it has all the organs intact. So she chops off Elizabeth's head and attaches it to Josephine's body. And, you get the same, creation scene, much like how it was early on in the movie. Elizabeth is in the tank and gets, with the eels, everything else. And of course, when she gets resurrected, Helena Bonham Carter's performance in this is just so well done. She sort of portrays, even through her body language, you can just feel the emotional weight and just the whole, not knowing who she is or what she is. So Victor tries to remind her of what she was. She starts dancing with her, constantly reminds her, do you love me? Do you remember me? All that sort of thing. Of course, the Frankenstein monster sees this and sees that he created a bride, and he says, oh, she's beautiful, and he says you can't have her, and he gets mad, and they have a tug of war. And of course, Elizabeth now remembers Victor after the whole tussle, and she is mad. She's mad what Victor has done to her. And Helena Bonham Carter, once again, her performance in this, her, body language, just so brilliant. She starts freaking out, and you can just tell through her emotion, through her body language. There's a brilliant moment where she's feeling her face, realizing what Victor has done to her, and you see a little lip quiver from Helena Bonham Carter's performance. And just could tell that the way she knows that Victor messed her up and tried to do the same experiment, but not on her, and she's just an experiment. He just, once again, is obsessed too much. And she, without any words, you could just tell through the performance how fed up she is. And she just lights herself on fire and blazes, just kills herself that way because she has had enough. She'd rather die than live in this whole grotesque form that she's in now. And it just played out beautifully. Then, after that, Victor dies, and of course, they were going to give him a funeral, but they see that the monster has aboard the ship, and he is emotionally saddened by the death of his creator and feels as though he is guilty for what he has done. And they have a funeral, a very nice little quiet funeral. But of course, the polar ice caps shift, and it's big, spectacle that unfolds. The monster doesn't want, board the ship. He wants to, live by his creator, and of course swims to this iceberg that Victor's on and lights the kerosene on fire where Victor is being drowned. Dead body is drowned, and because they're trying to burn him into ashes out onto sea to give him a proper send-off. Of course, the monster goes on the iceberg and joins Victor's dead corpse because he wants to die, because he doesn't want to live as the creation that his creator created. So yeah, that's basically how it ends. And wow, what a movie. And even the score too towards the end, that big orchestral score just elevates the scene just more, and just emotional impact. It's just brilliant. But yeah, that is how the movie ends. Is just the monster dies with his creator, and it's just done. It's just brilliant. Anyway, what did I think of the movie? Well, like I said, this movie is very faithfully adapted to the original book, at least to some extent, like I said. And honestly, if you can live with that, I think you can have a pretty good time with Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from 1994. I think it's well acted, well directed, and has gorgeous set pieces that will keep you entertained for sure. Now, what would I give this movie? Well, I would go with a 3.5 out of 5 rating because, there's a lot of cheesiness in this movie, a lot of hokey, over-the-top stuff in this movie, but I think if you can live with that, and if you're a fan of the novel, you probably will like this movie a lot. So yeah, that is my review of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and next week we're going to talk about the Saw franchise, 1 through Jigsaw. So look forward to that next Monday when I review Saw 1. So that is it for today's video for Movie Macabre Monday. Got nothing else to say, really. So, as always, give this video a like if you liked it. Comment down below if you liked this review. And if you want to stay subscribe and hit that bell icon. And as always, from Morgan Entertainment, stay entertained.